Welcome to another episode of Shared Experiences in Oncology and Rare Diseases, brought to you by myTomorrows. I'm your host, Erin Moriarty Wade. I'm a content specialist at myTomorrows and the mom of a child with a rare disease. Today, it's our pleasure to welcome a very special guest to the podcast. Jim Palma is the executive director of the TargetCancer Foundation, which is based in Boston. The TargetCancer Foundation works at the forefront of cancer research by funding innovative research, fostering collaborations between academia and industry, and raising awareness amongst physicians, scientists, and patients. Since joining the foundation in 2010, Jim has overseen its growth from a very small startup to now a nationally recognized foundation that supports comprehensive rare cancer research. Before joining the foundation, he spent more than a decade at Fidelity Investments. Jim is also a member of the board of directors of NORD, the National Organization for Rare Disorders, and a founding co-chair of the NORD Rare Cancers Coalition. And I know you have a lot of other jobs, but I'm going to stop there and say hello. And thank you so much for being here today, Jim. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the chance to be here with you.
Thank you. So just to kind of get us started, can you tell us about how the foundation started and why this is a personal mission for you?
Of course. So our foundation started like many foundations in the rare disease world start, and that's through the experience of a patient. And in this case, the patient was my brother-in-law, Paul. He was 38 when he was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma. And Paul was an otherwise very healthy, active person, certainly nothing that would have indicated that he would have been diagnosed with any cancer, no less one that none of us had ever heard of. Like many patients facing rare cancers, Paul found very quickly that there were really no treatments available for his cancer and very little research being carried out. And this inspired Paul to start TargetCancer Foundation himself in an effort to drive research towards rare cancers like the one that he had. Paul passed away in 2009, just under 2 years after being diagnosed. And at that point, his family, including my sister, who's his wife, and myself and others, decided to keep the foundation going, and we've been doing it ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. And so sad to lose him so young. That's really, really a tragedy.
Yeah.
Wow. And I guess it's been a while now, but can you tell us a little bit about sort of how it's grown and evolved? I know you started very small and now you've made huge strides, and you have a lot of exciting initiatives going on. So tell us more about sort of that evolution.
Yeah. So again, like so many others in this space, we fell into this somewhat unexpectedly, and certainly without expertise or knowledge of how to operate as advocates and within the rare disease space. So we learned by doing, and we got to work quickly, and we're very, very fortunate to have been connected early on with some key scientific minds in the Boston area who played a key role in helping us develop a funding philosophy and really understand how to make an impact as a small foundation. We, of course, didn't have millions of dollars to give for research grants. So we needed to figure out how to make the most impact possible with relatively small grants in the neighborhood of $50,000 to $75,000 at the beginning. So we did that. We located some young researchers who were doing some really key work in some rare cancers early on, and started funding them, and really built the foundation around those efforts.
That's great. That's a really smart strategy.
Yeah. Again, I wish I could say that we had a long-term plan for that. Really, in the beginning, we were trying to do as much as we possibly could as quickly as possible by raising money and giving grants. And for a long time, that's the strategy that we followed. And of course, over time became more sophisticated in how we did that, and started expanding to other rare cancers. So much of our focus was funding basic research in cholangiocarcinoma. We then moved on to esophageal cancer as well, another rare cancer with a lot of unmet need. We started expanding to the development of scientific conferences, many of which we still hold today. But as time went on, and as we worked more and more with patients who started finding us more often and just reaching out to us for general help and guidance, we really realized that there's more that we could be doing to directly impact patients today, rather than solely funding research that takes a longer term look at developing treatments. And that led to the development of our clinical trial, TRACK, which we're currently running today, which I think we'll probably talk more about later. But that's really represented the biggest shift in our focus since being founded.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I do want to ask, I have some questions for you about track. But before we get there, I want to just go back a little bit where you talked about sort of the idea of, not having this huge budget, but you were going to fund younger researchers that were lacking funding for the most basic research building blocks. Why is that? Why was that important? And sort of how did that address the catch-22 in cancer research funding?
Yeah, I would say there were really two sides to it. So what you mentioned is absolutely right. There is a catch-22, and that's that the major funding sources, places like the NCI or NIH, that really give large multi-year grants, focus those grants on more established programs that maybe have research tools in place and publications and things like that. But then who is funding scientists to create those basic research tools and get those early publications in so that they qualify for those larger grants eventually? And if nobody does that, they may not ever make it to that point. That's where philanthropy can really step in and make a very, very big impact. So, I think we recognized that early on that we had a role to play, even with relatively smaller grants, to help research programs get off the ground and do that basic work. The other part of it was that, and this was actually something Paul realized, again, he was a lawyer, not a scientist, but this all became very clear to us as we were desperately searching for answers and how to treat this rare cancer. There are basic research tools, things like cell lines or mouse models, that exist in great numbers for common cancers and are easily available through public repositories and otherwise. But for rare cancers, often they don't exist at all, and really none. And that can really hold back progress in a rare cancer. How can a scientist test a hypothesis, run an experiment if he doesn't have tools, the basic tools to do that with? Also, how can drug companies pursue drug targets when they can't access the tools either? So much of our early work, and to be honest, we still fund this work today, 12 years later, has been on focused on the development of cell lines in cholangiocarcinoma, for example, helping build the infrastructure to make sure that surgical specimens are being used in a lab to create these tools, funding the creation of the tools in a general sense, and doing everything we can to make sure that those repositories start to grow and then move them into the public domain so that they move outside the lab where they were created and become available to other researchers. So that's really been our strategy. And it's worked out really well. It's been a long-term investment, but one that's yielded a really robust collection in cholangiocarcinoma at Massachusetts General Hospital that has really helped push a lot of research forward.
That's amazing. That must be very rewarding to see what has been able to grow from funding that kind of basic research.
Absolutely. And certainly things have changed. There's still a huge unmet need in cholangiocarcinoma, but there are also many now FDA-approved treatments. And while, of course, there was an incredible community that contributed, we feel very proud and grateful to have been a part of that community to help some of the early stage research that led to those discoveries.
That's great. So in addition to kind of that seed funding for early research, what are some other ways that you've been able to fund and support rare cancer research? I think you've mentioned there were some fellowships for medical students and some other projects that you've been involved with.
Yeah, so early on, very early days, we did fund fellowships for medical students, again, trying to intervene at the earliest stage possible to help put researchers on a career track towards rare cancers. There is a much more favorable career funding landscape in common cancers. And there are a lot of challenges that a young investigator will undertake by dedicating themselves to a rare cancer that's harder to fund. So again, this is a place where philanthropy can play a role and help people put people on their way towards a career focused on rare cancer. So that was part of that effort. I would say the other thing that we've done that's really grown over the years is the development of scientific meetings. So back in 2012, we sort of developed a concept around think tank scientific meetings that we started holding in different rare cancers. And the concept there is bringing together a relatively small amount of people, 50 to 100 doctors, scientists, clinicians, patients and advocates, to really have a conversational meeting, one that facilitates a lot of back and forth and networking versus solely data presentations that people are just sitting in and listening to. And those have been really, really successful meetings. We hold one in gastroesophageal cancer every year. And we're actually, and I think we'll talk about this more later as well, developing a new meeting in precision medicine of rare cancers starting this year as well.
Excellent. And that, you said that includes patient advocates or families as well.
Absolutely. We hope to have patient speakers. These are highly scientific meetings, but it is always important, especially for the scientists in the room who don't interact with patients. We have a lot of doctors in the room who know the patient experience well, but we work all the time with scientists who maybe have never even met the patients that they're working to serve. So that can be a very, very key and powerful connection to bring together.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm involved in that with CARA, the Childhood Arthritis Rheumatology Research Alliance, and we have an annual scientific meeting and does exactly what you're describing, but for pediatric rheumatology. And it's amazing to be involved, and the physicians, they want the families there, they want our input, and it's a really rewarding experience, I think, all the way around. So
absolutely.
Great. That's excellent. So you mentioned briefly about the TRACK trial, but for our listeners who are not familiar with that, can you kind of walk us through that? How did that come about, and why is it so important for rare cancers, and especially rare cancers that don't have a primary tumor that's easy to identify?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we changed focus as a foundation when we started working more directly with patients rather than solely researchers. And by working with patients, we really gained a better understanding of the challenges that people are facing day to day. And we experience some of these challenges ourselves. But these have also evolved over time in response to new treatments and new technologies that are available. And really key among those is biomarker testing or genomic testing or molecular profiling, many names for the same thing, but testing that helps to identify the particular mutations that might be driving a patient's cancer. And then hopefully by identifying those mutations, identifying targeted treatments that can effectively treat the cancer. This is incredibly important in rare cancers, where many times patients, just like we were, are offered no real treatment opportunities. They may be treated with old chemo regimens or regimens that are really intended for other types of cancer. So the promise of a targeted therapy that hones in on a particular mutation driving cancer is very promising in rare cancers where there's so little available. It also can lead to the identification of clinical trials, which are also very, very important in treating rare cancers, sometimes even the best option for treating a rare cancer. So one of the primary barriers, though, to this testing is access, awareness, insurance reimbursement. There's a lot of reasons why patients don't get this test. So we wanted to find a way to enable access to this testing while also providing an interpretation of the test and how to best use it to guide treatment. So that led to the development of TRACK, which has parallel research and patient impact goals. And on the patient side, just in short, it utilizes remote consenting, which means that patients can fully drive the process of enrollment and do so from their home with no requirement to travel. Consenting is done via a website. It provides access to biomarker testing at no cost, so tissue and blood testing through our partnership with Foundation Medicine. And then finally, we convene a virtual molecular tumor board who evaluates the results of the testing along with patient medical histories, and they then provide treatment recommendations back to the patient and their treating physician. Like I said, these reports can be very difficult to interpret. And what we're hoping to do is provide a really broad look from a multidisciplinary group of experts to offer recommendations on how to best develop treatments around the genomic results. On the research side, we're also following patients for a year to track sort of their outcomes and how they're doing after the recommendations are given. And we're also repeating the blood genomic testing several times during that year, also to track how things are changing in their genomics of their cancer as their cancer progresses or is treated. So,
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that.
yeah.
And what, I can't remember if you mentioned it today, but to remind us again, what types of rare cancer is it open to?
So it's actually open to all rare cancers. And we define rare cancers for this study as 6 per one incidence of 6 per 100,000 per year. So in the US, that's about 20,000 cases per year. Solid tumors and lymphomas, and for ages 18 and over. So that's how we're defining all rare cancers. We do have 100, so there's 400 patients total in the study. 200 are any rare cancer, as I just mentioned, or as I just defined it. 100 are cholangiocarcinoma, and 100 are cancer of unknown primary.
Okay. And where are you at right now in recruitment?
We're about a quarter of the way through our recruitment at this point. So, certainly moving along, and just getting increasing interest in this study. Every time we hold a webinar or meet a new group, we'll get a lot of contact. So our team is our primary goal. We have a lot of goals with the study. The most important goal from the outset is that when a patient consents, we move as quickly as we possibly can to get them to that virtual molecular tumor board so that those recommendations can be given. A lot of the patients who reach out to us are reaching out with a lot of urgency. They may be in later stages of their cancer, so we don't have time to wait around. So we really move as quickly as we possibly can to serve people as best we can.
That's great. And how have you mostly raised awareness about it? Is it through oncologists or patient advocacy groups or both?
I would say mostly patient advocacy groups. So, TargetCancer Foundation is an umbrella rare cancer organization. We're very fortunate to have a lot of great partners and friends in the rare cancer advocacy space. As you mentioned earlier, we were co-founders of the Rare Cancer Coalition at NORD. So we have a lot of partners that we work closely with. And really our strategy is to reach out to those groups, talk about the trial, maybe present to their patient communities, or if the groups prefer, have them distribute information or post about it in their newsletter to let people know that this is available to them. We do work with clinicians as well, and I think as time goes on, we'll increase our partnerships from a clinical perspective, but really we see this as a patient-driven initiative. This is where we're trying to really empower people to start this process themselves. So really our primary goal is to reach out to patients themselves.
Okay, excellent. And I guess you mentioned that the ECOA and the patients being able to do the consents remotely and everything. Has that mostly been an opportunity, or have there been any challenges in being remote? I guess during the pandemic, that was probably a blessing, but I'm assuming there are also some hiccups along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was part of the study design before COVID. So in a lot of ways, without meaning to, we ended up with a study that really lent itself to continuing well during the pandemic, while everybody was at home. I would say it's almost all benefits on the patient side. For the people enrolling in this study, it really eases the process. And we've also incorporated things like mobile phlebotomy. So rather than asking patients to go to the hospital for blood draws, we're sending phlebotomists to their homes to do it there.
That's nice.
So I do think it's mostly beneficial in that respect. On the back end, that's where the challenges come in. As TargetCancer Foundation runs all operations of this study, we've developed an internal infrastructure to run the study ourselves. And when you work remotely in a decentralized trial like this, rather than having one site with established contacts and a workflow to get information over to you, we're basically working with a new institution for every single patient that enrolls in the study. And that creates a lot of challenges because we're asking for med records for the first time every time. We're asking for tissue for the first time every time, and that can lead to all in all, it's absolutely I wouldn't change a thing. It's the way that we want to do the study, and it's the right way. I would say the greatest challenges come on the back end for us running the study.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds extremely labor intensive, but
Yep.
excellent that you're able to reach patients wherever they live. So
Yeah.
it's excellent. I think we're almost running out of time a little bit here, but I wanted to ask you a little bit more on the patient side. I loved the videos on your website, and there was a example of a man who had donated tissue from his tumor and the experience of like actually connecting him with the researcher. And can you tell me a little bit about sort of how has that been fulfilling for you all to be able to really connect patients and researchers and in the way that you have?
Yeah, that particular story is one. Very few things in my career have matched that experience. Where I was working with a patient and got to know him and his family well, and they had let me know that I met them after his initial resection. He had cholangiocarcinoma, and let me know that he had donated his tissue to a particular research sort of initiative at MGH, which was the same one that we were participating in as funders. And I basically said, your tissue, I know exactly where your tissue went to. It's part of this initiative, and it was helped to create a mouse model.
Wow.
And he said, well, can I come in and see the mouse? And I said, I don't see why not. So we, through a little bit of work, we were able to make a connection and actually have that patient and his family come to the lab where his tissue was donated and where it was helped to create a mouse model for a particular mutation in cholangiocarcinoma that is a key mutation and one for which there are now FDA-approved treatments.
Wow,
And
that's amazing.
that tissue, that mouse, all these years later is still being used, still driving research. It really lives on. So it was an amazing experience to connect the dots in that way, have somebody come to the lab, see how their generosity helped to really create so much really, really key research. A very emotional and powerful experience, and one that I certainly haven't forgotten.
That's incredible. And what a wonderful legacy for his family to know that he contributed to this. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Excellent. One more thing I want to ask you. I know we're almost running out of time, but you have a lot of exciting things coming up in the fall. Can you tell us briefly about the Rare Cancer Think Tank?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, we've for about 10 years now, we've been holding think tank meetings in different rare cancers, cholangiocarcinoma, gastroesophageal cancer primarily. But this year, based on what we're doing with TRAC, we felt like there was an opportunity to build a new think tank meeting around precision medicine of rare cancers. So for the first time in September, and we haven't formally announced this yet, so I guess we'll be formally announcing it here. We will be holding the think tank on advancing precision medicine and rare cancers, and that'll be held in Boston on September 21st. And that'll be a half-day meeting this time around, but probably something bigger going forward that will really focus on different topics related to utilization of precision medicine and rare cancers specifically. In addition, later that day, we'll have our annual gala. So since our earliest days as a foundation, our gala has been a key event as a fundraiser, but also a way to bring together our community, all of the different people who work with us and support us. And of course, we haven't had this event now since 2019. So we're really excited to bring it back.
Finally, that'll be fun. That's in October
Yeah.
usually, or when is that?
That it used to be in the fall, and then it was in the spring. Our last one was scheduled for April 2020, and of course we couldn't hold that.
Yeah.
So this will be both events will happen on September 21st.
Oh, the same day. Okay. Wow. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. Well, you got an exciting fall ahead of you. So
Yes.
that's
Absolutely.
excellent.
Busy time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is amazing. It's so fascinating and also very inspiring to hear what you guys are doing with the foundation. And we really appreciate you sharing a little bit about your efforts. Is there anything else that you think that you wanted to mention that I didn't ask about?
No, I think you've really covered everything nicely, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today and to talk about our work. So thank you.
Well, thank you. This was excellent. We really enjoyed speaking with you, and we appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best of luck with TRAC and everything else going forward. Thank you again for being here, and thank you also to our listeners. Please tune in again next time.